Hello, everybody. So today is Sunday, and unless Michael Saylor is vacationing somewhere else in the world, we should have had the announcement, the chart, the green dot chart, or the more dots are coming chart tweeted by now. I don't see that tweet anywhere. And so that leads me to believe, actually, the title of this video, right? Is Saylor waiting? Did Saylor not buy this week? Is there something going on? Did Saylor finally decide to just sit and wait, which is what I think he should be doing all the way? I've interpreted most of his actions the past 2 months as simply signaling to the market, showing the market that Saylor is doing something, but really there's nothing to be done. If you ask me, all we have to do is wait for Bitcoin to recover. Bitcoin is behaving like a stable coin. It's so boring. It's been many, many months of boredom now. We are trading at 63,000 plus or minus even $200 or something like that right now. The volatility is gone for Bitcoin. We're waiting for the fall. And I think Saylor may actually be waiting for the fall as well. So he doesn't tweet a chart. All he tweeted was this, the fact that if you look at the 1 year return, actually Stretch has worked. Stretch has worked, yeah, because sure, it lost $5, but it gained 9%, and of course it IPO'd lower than 100. So it actually didn't lose $5 if you bought it at the IPO. But anyways, if you look at the 1 year return, Stretch worked. If you look at most periods of buying Stretch, as long as it was a while back, it worked because you've been getting exactly 1% a month, right? So even if you bought it at 95 5 months ago, you'd still be break even. And the point he's trying to make, and I entirely agree with that, is that of course it's way less volatile than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is sitting at a depressing $63,000 price. Bitcoin is sitting at a minus 47%. So Bitcoin's been halved. And that's not true for most of the digital instruments that Saylor has created, aside from Strike. But why is Strike going down? Because a large value in Strike is the call option, the perpetual call option on MSTR. That's a lot of the value in Strike. And of course, that call option has lost a lot of value. So that's the reason why Strike is down, because Strike's price is much more correlated to the value of MSTR. That is definitely not the case of the other preferred. And so that's why if you look at the return, it's pretty much not even worth a commentary. It's pretty much flat compared to the return of Bitcoin. And that's why digital credit was created in the first place, to help people who actually don't stand volatility, who can't stand it, who don't like it. So I think you may be waiting now, and it's understandable, because the MNAV is 1.04, which, is disappointing to say the least. By the way, whenever I tell you 1.5% correlation, that comes from that amplification number. What I've noticed is that over, periods of time, shorter periods of time, a week, something like that, 1.5x is roughly what we see. I get that number from the strategy dashboard. So if you look at the main strategy.com dashboard, you see MNAV 1.04, amplification, you'll see 1.48. I would expect that number to stay largely the same going forward. The reserve, is the reserve enough? 4.65 billion. I guess that because we had no tweet that makes me believe Saylor is enough. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought he would round it up to 5 billion. But I guess that's enough for me. If he did nothing, I'm happy. If he did nothing, that's bullish, because in my view right now, all he needs to do is to do nothing and wait for macro to improve. And as macro improves, Bitcoin will improve. At least that is my take. So now we're going to move on to two different things. So first of all, quickly, preparing for the next FUD. I've seen that on X, go around on X. People are making a big deal about the MSCI proposal. It's a proposal to remove non-operating companies out of their indices and non-operating stocks out of their indices. And so actually, you'll find it interesting that could actually impact other stocks. Like there's a UK stock, Yellow Cake Uranium or something like that could be impacted by that. So this proposal of MSTI is now not necessarily discriminatory against Bitcoin. It could also include uranium stocks, and this is my argument here, but I think a lot of gold stocks could be excluded as well if we use the rules of MSCI. And I saw this FUD circulate And there's a lot of things to say about this FUD. First of all, this FUD assumes that Saylor is going to keep raising funds by having a high MNAV, by having an MNAV of 1.2 or 1.3, and then you issue new shares into the indices. You have a perpetual bid on the indices, and so you make your $4. We sell $100 for 104. You make that in perpetuity as you ATM. That's what folks are assuming. This is why folks are assuming that this is a bad thing. There's a lot of things to say about that. First of all, the plan of Saylor with developing the preferreds, whether it's stretch or strike, stride, the preferreds were developed by Saylor to tap into the bond market, the bond and the currency market with stretch. If you would argue that stretch is semi-stable, which is still an argument right now, but it could also touch the currency market. So Saylor is going after a market that is 3 to 4 times the size of the equity market, and Saylor over the long run, I believe that Saylor's main form of accumulation of Bitcoin will be via the bond market and the currency market, and not necessarily via the equity market anymore. Eventually, in the next phase of the company, I believe Saylor wants to stop selling equity except in phases of extreme hype. So if you look at it this way, first of all, it doesn't impact it nearly as much because the preferreds have been included in bond ETFs, in preferred shares ETF, more than ever, actually. So that's point number one. And then point number 2 is, of course, this is ridiculous, but this is what I've always said on the channel. If you watch my other videos on the channel, I've always criticized the S&P 500 for the same reason, right? That's why Tesla was added so late to the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is also a committee deciding this. So this is a committee who's really insisting, because the second year they put this proposal forward, so the committee is really trying to steer the decision of the investors, etc. But it's a committee who is deciding that. And of course, these type of indices, in my view, are ridiculous. That's why I've always praised on this channel total stock indices. To me, total stock indices are much different than the S&P 500, because the S&P 500, you have a committee who's working really hard to underperform just owning the entire index. And that's why I've liked QQQ much better, because QQQ is a formula. It's market cap weighted, right? It's not a committee. And because of that, QQQ, which is the biggest index that strategy is in right now, is QQQ. We are not at risk of losing QQQ because QQQ is simply a formula. The only way we lose QQQ is, for example, if Bitcoin drops to like 25,000 and strategy trades at like a 0.8 MNAV. That's one way we could lose QQQ, because then we wouldn't be in the top 100. Another way we could lose to QQQ is maybe there's a bunch of new AI companies that outrank strategy, that move up the rank, and then strategy moves below rank 100. But it's a formula. It's much more fair to use a formula than to use a committee. So it's a committee. The committee doesn't like Bitcoin, and they make it clear. And I guess they included uranium stocks and gold stocks for the sake of consistency. Be interesting to see, like, if oil royalty stocks or natural gas resources royalty stocks, could they be also excluded as well? But here's the key part here, and you won't find this part of a FUD in many articles. If you actually look into it, it's the delisting would happen for firms that fail the test for 2 consecutive years. So let's assume we have feedback. The feedback says, oh yeah, MSCI, you should remove BTC treasury companies. So you have the feedback, then you have a decision on October 16. And then, so you have 1 year when you don't qualify in October, right? In November of 2026, really. And then you have another year when you don't qualify, and then you get delisted. So that's really a 1.5 year thing. Then at that point, if Bitcoin has recovered in late 27, it won't matter at all anymore. So really the delisting would happen at the end of 27 if it were to even happen. So we're commenting on ifs, right? It's like 2 ifs in a row. If this happened, then this could happen, right? And this is where we get into complete narrative and not really anything meaningful or substantial. So this is why I think this is very much FUD. And then let me move on to not FUD, but to now bullish news, which in my view is not priced in, or at least is ignored in the market. And by the way, I much prefer this type of action. I don't know how much Saylor, how much influence Saylor has had in convincing Norway, for example, to get exposure to Bitcoin through MicroStrategy, or convincing the ETFs. I don't think he did any of that. It's just mathematics. They just added because the yield is good. I don't know if he had any play into that, or like working with Orange BTC for an ETF of preferred shares in Brazil. I don't know if he had any play in that, but this is nonetheless very, very bullish news. In my view, perhaps much more bullish than playing around selling 100 million of Bitcoin just to have a signal and be in the news, right? So this past week, we've had a few bullish things. First of all, this is especially bullish for Solana. We now have digital money on Solana, right? With STRC USX listed on Solana, right? So a synthetic form of STRC is listed on Solana. This is perhaps even more bullish for Solana than it is for Bitcoin or digital credit. And the way I look at this, of course, Saylor noted that it's a notification. The tweets of Saylor are a notification. But he still wants to notify us that Stretch is on Solana. This is consistent with the fact that Saylor has been much less harsh on other forms of blockchain than he has been in the past. Saylor, in my view, is not a Bitcoin maximalist, right? And the BIP 110 debate shows us that Saylor is perhaps not the maximalist that people would have had you believe a few years ago. And so the fact that he notifies us about Solana, to me, is a big deal. And that's very bullish for Solana. Same for stable coins. If you look at all of the stable coins being moved to Solana, right? Delisted from Ethereum, relisted on Solana, minted on Solana, as we say, it's pretty insane. So Solana is actually on a roll. But if you look at that, then of course Stretch making it available to Brazil. So I think this is more of a way to go, right? If you look at Stream, when he listed the instrument in Europe, well, he had a very hard time doing it, and it's not that easy to buy in Europe. Stream, it's listed in Luxembourg. It's just not that easy to buy. So will Stretch be available in Europe? Well, maybe a European treasury company can work on creating an ETF over there, right? And the same in all sorts of parts of the world, right? And then lastly, now you have Norway's fund, who has 700 million exposure to Bitcoin. Most of it is for strategy. Keep in mind that exposure must have been much higher before, because of course the stock dropped so much. So it must have been higher exposure before. But just it's a little less than 1%, right? They have a little bit less than 1% exposure to Bitcoin. So again, Norway sovereign fund, super conservative here. But to me, this is nonetheless bullish that a lot of companies are choosing to just own MSTR and perhaps not an ETF. So perhaps they trust the OPSEC of MSTR better. Perhaps they trust MSTR better. Perhaps they can't buy the ETF outright. I don't really know the reason, but it's still a big deal and a sign that Norway would own this level of MSTR. At least I like it. I think it's pretty bullish. So anyways, this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.